Have you ever wondered how everyday chemicals might be affecting your thyroid? Today, we're going to dive into the world of environmental chemicals. We're going to talk about their impact on hypothyroidism and how you can better protect yourself using the principles of functional medicine. Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hashimoto's Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Brad Shook, and today we're going to be talking about a really important topic that doesn't get enough attention. It's been in the news a lot more lately, but this is the topic and discussion about environmental chemicals that are used in industry and agriculture that are everywhere around us, that are in our water, our food, our air, the furniture we sit on, the clothing we wear, the personal care products we put on our body, the cleaning supplies that we use, they are everywhere. And there is a tremendous amount of information and research that is building, that is indicating the varied and significant negative impacts that a lot of these chemicals can have on our health, from them bioaccumulating in our tissues, to being carcinogenic, to being estrogen blocking or hormone mimicking, to doing just a number of different things. I mean, there's so many negative consequences that a lot of these chemicals pose to our health. And I think that this is one of the things that is contributing to the rise of autoimmunity, the significant increases in autoimmunity, cancers, and really a lot of the modern health problems. I mean, these things can disrupt our hormonal physiology so many different ways. So if you think about it, just think about diabetes as an example. What's the problem with diabetes? Well, the problem with diabetes is it's a metabolism issue. It's tied to insulin, and this is something that could be disrupted too. I mean, there are a number of different issues, and many of these are still unknown because the vast majority of the 80,000 plus chemicals that are used in industry, used in agriculture, have not been studied for human safety. The safety of those chemicals has been put on the manufacturer, and I think that's a very that's a bad way to go about trying to regulate an industry. Just say, you know what, here we want you to test and determine if the product that you make money producing is dangerous to us and dangerous to the public. And if it is, we expect you to stop. But if it's not, keep making it and keep making money. I mean, it's really out of control, and we have to figure out a better way. And in the meantime, we need to become aware of a lot of these potential dangers and minimize our potential exposures and try to enhance our capacity to eliminate these things from our body. So let's get into how these chemicals might be silently affecting our health. Every day, whether we realize it or not, we're surrounded by all these chemicals. They're everywhere. It's in our food. It's on our furniture as a stain repellent. It is in the foam rubber of your furniture as a flame retardant. And with time, those things break down. They become dust in your house, and you get exposed to a lot of chemicals that you would never even imagine. You don't really know what's on or in your food. You don't really know what's in your water, in the air, what's in your cosmetics. I mean, you want to do the best job that you can to try and eliminate sources of exposure. And then you want to try to support the body's detoxification pathways, which, fortunately, our bodies have evolved ways to process and eliminate a lot of these chemicals. It's known as, the body's process is known as biotransformation. It's more commonly just referred to as detoxification, but the technical term is biotransformation, and it's how our liver converts these chemicals into compounds that can be eliminated through our urine, our sweat, and our feces. But there are some chemicals, there are some things, especially heavy metals, that our body cannot detoxify or biotransform. And these metals get stored in either our fat or our bone. And this could be a real problem long term. It's interesting, though, that if you look back in time, anthropological studies have identified and do show that some exposure to the metals have occurred to our ancestors. And so that is, it's interesting. I don't know exactly how much that, if that makes me feel any better, because we're still getting exposed to these metals. We know that they're problematic. And on top of that, we have all of these new chemicals that have been, synthesized and that are routinely used in agriculture and in industry. Now, if you have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, or if you're hypothyroid, this can be a real problem because, first of all, if you have a hypothyroid state, then you don't have the thyroid hormone activity to stimulate the cellular physiology and really have optimal detoxification capabilities. Your body is going to be compromised. And this can be a real problem because hypothyroidism can lead to a cascade of events that results in your body's inefficiency and decreased ability to biotransform or clear chemicals that you're getting exposed to clear them. And this can also lead to problems with loss of oral tolerance or loss of tolerance to the chemicals, which we would call loss of chemical tolerance. And this is immunologically. We're not just talking about, when you get exposed to a chemical having a reaction due to the dose of something. This is actually on an immunological level. So at the level of the immune system, and it's recognizing or not recognizing a chemical is what I'm talking about and referring to. Because if you start losing immune system tolerance to chemicals, and this could happen with hypothyroidism, and it could occur through, again, a cascade of events. Let's just say you're hypothyroid, so your liver enzymes and your biotransformation pathways of the liver are not as efficient. So therefore, you don't clear chemicals from the body as easily. And let's say, so then you have this greater burden of these chemicals. And then let's say that the hypothyroidism leads to inefficient or less efficient regeneration of the intestinal lining. So the cells that line the intestine don't turn over as rapidly. And then on top of that, let's say that you have slower digestive tract transit time. So you're not having bowel movements frequently enough, and the digesting food is staying in your intestines longer than it should, causing bacterial imbalance, which leads to inflammation and then causes the intestinal lining to be inflamed, and the bacteria there that are now growing in your gut become less favorable, and they create a state, an inflammatory environment where you have poor digestion, and it sets the stage for intestinal permeability, or the lay term for that's leaky gut. And then all this happens, and now you start getting the translocation, meaning the movement of things inside your intestinal tract through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream before they should be there, or maybe they shouldn't be there at all. So let's say you've got this poor GI tract environment. Now things are passing into the bloodstream, and partially digested food proteins passing into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. Bacterial cell wall fragments passing into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there, triggering an inflammatory response and really ramping up the immune system. Now, let's say this is happening. You're in this state of heightened immune surveillance and responsiveness. There's a higher state of inflammation. You have a decreased ability to biotransform and clear chemicals, and you're getting more immune reactivity. The immune system is on this heightened alert, and you're in this state that makes your body more vulnerable. Now you may start reacting to things abnormally. This is arguable that this is now a state where your body could become hyperreactive to things, and you could start developing autoimmunity. And this could make you particularly vulnerable now to some very significant negative reactions to chemicals. So a lot of times people think of chemicals as just being, a reaction that would just be related to and associated with the exposure to the dose or the amount of chemical. That's how a lot of people think about chemicals. But in reality, that is true. That's one way that the dose or the amount of a chemical is being toxic. But there's another way where if your immune system starts reacting to a chemical or seeing it as something foreign, it can create another situation where you could develop an autoimmune process. Now, this vulnerability with immune system reaction to chemicals is really a process that we should talk about called haptenation. And this is where a chemical binds to, let's say, a tissue. Let's say you're exposed to a chemical, and that chemical in your body, your immune system doesn't really see it. It's not really having an effect, but then that chemical binds to one of your tissues. And when it does this, it actually alters or changes the structure of the proteins in your tissue. Now, when this happens, this process called haptenation, this can confuse the immune system. Okay, and if your immune system's already hyperreactive because, let's say, you're losing tolerance to everything in the scenario that I was trying to paint in your mind, where hypothyroidism leads to poor biotransformation and the liver functions aren't working as well. The GI tract becomes inflamed. You get bacterial imbalance and dysbiosis. Then you develop leaky gut, and then things start moving into the bloodstream, and the immune system is hyperreactive at this point. And so let's say the stage is set. Now you get exposed to chemicals, or maybe you're already exposed to chemicals, and these chemicals, some of them are not being eliminated well, and they're binding to some of your tissues, and the immune system sees these altered tissue proteins, which now that's called a neoantigen. It's a new complex that now the immune system doesn't recognize because it's been damaged or changed from the chemical. Now your immune system may start reacting to your own tissues, and this is a real major concern. And one of the underlying mechanisms that I always try to keep in mind and consider when I'm working with someone is like, okay, what are the triggers and drivers of the autoimmune process? Does anything in their history show us or indicate that this could be the case? And then you can do some testing. There's a panel through Cyrix Laboratories that I'll often run called a chemical immune reactivity screen. I think it's Array 11, if I'm not mistaken. I often get Array 11 and 12 confused, but I believe it's Array 11, and it's a chemical immune reactivity screen, and it looks at antibodies in the blood to a number of different of potential chemicals. And this is a real important thing to consider, because what you want to do is, of course, try to remove your exposure to those chemicals, but then you also have to support all of these different systems where you may have some breakdown or dysfunction. So obviously, in this scenario, if your thyroid was low or suboptimal, you would want to make sure that you were able to take a thyroid hormone replacement and have sufficient quantity of hormone. Then the next step is you want to do everything that you can to dampen the autoimmune process that is usually the cause of hypothyroidism, right? 9 out of 10 cases are caused by Hashimoto's, an autoimmune condition, and that autoimmunity poses its own set of problems that you have to address. Inflammation is one of the primary ones, and so if you can intervene at multiple points and support the body's physiology, then you have the best chance to calm down the immune system. But you want to try to remove as many of these triggers as possible. So this process, the formation of immune reactivity against your self tissues through the production of neoantigens, these tissues that have been changed by chemicals binding to them, which would be called haptenation, is something that we really, really want to consider. Not everyone, has these problems, obviously, and that's why it all really comes down to this concept of tolerance and your immune system's tolerance or lack of tolerance to the environment. Now, if you're not familiar with that concept of immune system tolerance, I just recorded another podcast on oral tolerance, and that's really the tolerance or lack of tolerance of your immune system to the foods that you eat. And this is very similar to what I'm discussing here, but this is regarding chemicals. And you can have similar drivers of both of these processes, and they both have a strong association with the gut typically. Now, you can have loss of chemical tolerance, for example, and it not have anything to do with the digestive tract. It could be that you get a hit from a chemical or an exposure, and it's via the lungs, or it comes through the skin. And it all just depends. I mean, there's so many factors here that as an individual kind of set the stage for unique, advantages and disadvantages. And this is why, you might have, for example, 3 mechanics working on cars for years and years, and they get exposed to all kinds of different chemicals, and 2 of them are fine, and 1 of them develops cancer, or 1 is fine, 1 develops autoimmunity, and 1 develops cancer. And maybe it's because of their unique genetic susceptibilities, or maybe their unique capacities to either detoxify, eliminate, or what they're technically called biotransform the chemicals that they're exposed to, or not. I mean, some of them will have differences in our capacity to eliminate these things. So we all have our unique susceptibilities and also probably some advantages as well. So this is something that you have to keep in mind when we're discussing this. That this really you have your own unique fingerprint as to what you're susceptible to, and these chemicals are not going to do the same thing to everyone. So it's a really important thing that we need to discuss, though. And this is really, I just want to bring it back to and make sure that you understand that if you have Hashimoto's, autoimmunity, or hypothyroidism, this can predispose you to having a higher susceptibility to these things. And so you want to do everything that you can to manage even minor thyroid dysfunction. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, what I want to talk about next are some of the things that we can actually do and strategies that we can implement. In our journey here to understand the impact of these environmental chemicals, especially for people that have Hashimoto's and autoimmune conditions and hypothyroidism, it's really important to recognize that not all chemicals are equal. So some chemicals like bisphenol A or BPA, they're really commonly used in plastics, and they make them softer and more flexible. These are the things that for years, and I think they're still promoted. But when my kids were young, there's always these BPA bottles and BPA pacifiers and whatnot. And though I think that's good, the plastics and the things that they replace them with, it's just a different form of BPA that really hasn't been studied enough, and it may be worse. So it's one of those things where, like I said, there's a lot that we need to learn about these chemicals. But BPA is really commonly used in plastics, and I think it was a study that I was reading that said 90% of the U.S. population has high levels of BPA. And it's just an unbelievable number, like 90%. And I think there's so many scenarios that are similar to this. If you look at glyphosate exposure, which is the herbicide glyphosate, and other chemicals in our environment, you're going to find very similar numbers. And people will say, well, okay, but why should I really be concerned about that? And really, it comes back to our bioindividuality. But for most people, fortunately, the body's natural detoxification pathways can eliminate the BPA. But for those of us with compromised systems, and especially due to conditions like Hashimoto's, because remember I said how the low thyroid can cause you to have slowed or inefficient biotransformation or ability to clear these chemicals from your body. This process really becomes, everything becomes less efficient. So this inefficiency of detoxification can make, for example, BPA more toxic, just increasing its potential for immune reactivity in our system. And BPA has been linked to a ton of problems, to triggering thyroid autoimmunity and even neurological conditions that kind of mimic what you would see with multiple sclerosis. So it is seriously, a very negative thing, and something that you want to get out of your diet and out of your environment. But it's really not just BPA, of course. As I'd mentioned in the example with the garage mechanics, our genetic makeup plays a real significant role in how we process these chemicals. So some of us, due to genetic variations, might find it harder to clear clear out certain things, and other things are easier to eliminate. But if you combine this with the inflammation and then the metabolic dysfunction that's associated with hypothyroidism, you've got a recipe for really increased vulnerability. I mean, it's not all like doom and gloom, and it shouldn't be, because I think there's a lot of hope for sure. And because the good news is that we're becoming much more aware of these issues, so we can start to learn and take steps to help ourselves. And some of the things that you want to start doing is, first of all, you want to realize that it's not just the quantity of the chemical. So it's not necessarily just the amount, but it's our body's ability to metabolize and eliminate them. And it's also this immune tolerance, which your immune system could react strongly, or you could have a problem with the chemical at a very low dose, because the immune system is able to recognize and see chemicals long before they're typically going to be toxic. You're going to have some things that are going to have endocrine disrupting effects, probably at a low dose and they don't affect the immune system necessarily. And then sometimes you're going to have increased sensitivity one way or the other. So I don't want to confuse it any more than I already have. But the main thing is that you have an immune tolerance, and then you have a toxic capacity for all these different chemicals, and they're two different things that you have to consider. That's why when I'm looking at someone and we're trying to determine if chemicals and metals and whatnot are playing a role in their autoimmunity, I usually look to see. I look at like a urinary panel typically to look for quantities of metals and chemicals, and then I will look at an immune-based panel to look at immune system reactivity. Okay, so you want to look at them two different ways. So how can we improve, eliminate these things from our environment more efficiently and help our body to clear them? And so the first thing is stop getting exposed to them, right? So I recommend to everyone that I work with to download the Environmental Working Groups app. And they have an app that you can scan all of your personal care products, everything that you use for laundry detergent, all of your stuff, your lotions, your toothpaste, your deodorants, everything. And you can scan it, and then you can look for relative toxicity score. And they have a number that they assign to the different ingredients, and you can look at the breakdown of those ingredients. But they also have EWG approved products. So you can go there and you can actually select products or become aware of products that you can purchase that have a lower overall score, which is better in this case. So reduce your exposure. And obviously there are things like, I teach this a lot, but there are a lot of things that you want to keep out of your house. And like one thing is you never want to store things in plastic. I recommend, glass, Pyrex containers. And, if you have like a rubber lid or something, I think that's okay. I mean, I'm still using rubber lids, but I try not to have anything in contact with the lid if I can help it. I try to let the food cool down just a little bit before I put a lid on it. And then, try to keep things from directly contacting the lid, like not overfilling the container. I think that's really important. And I never heat the lids. You want to try to also, if you have any plastic like that, like we don't have any, I would not recommend any plastic cups or anything with hot liquids, or no plastic cups at all. There's just not really a need for that. You can use, metal cups and some other things that you can use in place of those that are probably better. But you want to remove your exposure. Like definitely, don't microwave anything in plastic or styrofoam at all. Don't drink coffee out of styrofoam or even the paper cups that are lined with that have like a BPA or a wax lining. Don't drink hot liquids through those plastic lids. There's so many little things that you can do to minimize your exposure. That can be huge, and there's more that you can do than that for sure. But I don't have time to go through all those little more minute details. But there's a lot that you can do there. But just those are some really important ways that you can reduce some of your exposures. The other thing is like dietarily. So to support you can try to buy, if you have a budget for it, you can really focus on trying to buy organic foods. That's going to reduce your exposure to herbicides and pesticides significantly. But if you can't, then you want to try to make sure that you can go to the Environmental Working Group, or EWG.org, and you can download their Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 food list, and they have one every year. And you can make sure that you can purchase some produce that's non-organic, that is less sprayed with herbicides and pesticides, and then you want to make sure that there's other produce that you do purchase organically, because it is very heavily sprayed, and you wouldn't want. So there are some things that are safer to purchase conventional. Is the point there? And that's a way that you can also, with a budget, you can try to save some money. Now, just conceptually, though, from a dietary perspective, you want to try to embrace what I would call like an anti-inflammatory diet. Typically, that means that you're eating foods that are rich in flavonoids. Flavonoids are the things that give, and polyphenols and whatnot, that give the foods, plant foods, fruits and vegetables, color. Okay, so things like berries and, like, if you're going to eat cabbage, for example, mix in some of the red cabbage and greens and whatnot that have color, things that are vary in colors. If you can eat the colors of the rainbow every day, you're going to get a diverse amount of flavonoids, and these are really important because these are prebiotics. These things also are a lot of them have compounds in them, these plant defense chemicals, this is all there's some of this science is very debatable. People are speaking out saying, hey, these plant defense chemicals may not be great, but based on the information I have, low doses of plant sources of some of these plant defense chemicals can actually upregulate the liver's detoxification pathways or biotransformation pathways, and that can help to enhance the clearance of some of these things that we're getting exposed to in our environment. And they say, some people will argue that those plant defense chemicals are just low-dose toxins, and I guess, yeah, maybe that is what they are, but they do stimulate this increase in these enzymes that can help to clear things. So, until we have more definitive information, I'm going to use what I've seen work clinically with people, and I think that's really important to do, is because there's a lot of nutritional science. I mean, nothing is 100%. We don't know for certain, but I think if you see something that's working and that has worked clinically, and I've worked with a lot of people that are autoimmune, there are certain strategies that tend to be helpful. And if I see that something works and it's working with a lot of people, then I'm going to continue to use that until we have more definitive information on emerging opinions about diet. And I'm not like I'm always open to learning new things and changing my current beliefs that I have about the way that I'm doing things and what I'm recommending and trying to give to people to help themselves. So anyway, this type of diet tends to be helpful, and then also eating foods that are higher in sulfur, like garlic and onions. They can add a little bit of flavor to your dishes and stuff too, but they also have the ability to support your detoxification pathways. And, there are a lot of antioxidants that are sulfur-based that are super important. So that's a good way. So diet can be really, really helpful. If you eat, fruits, vegetables, I am an advocate of eating meat and adequate protein, I think are extremely helpful. Staying away from a lot of the grains tend to be problematic for the populations of people that I work with, and then they also are very difficult to get without herbicides and whatnot sprayed on them. So it's the fruits, vegetables, and they tend to have enough fiber, and they have very diverse phytonutrients. In combination with animal-based proteins tend to really help people improve their health, especially when they're autoimmune. And that helps to change so many different aspects of their physiology, support detoxification pathways, help the gut, and can really be a very powerful tool to modulate what's happening and modulate the immune response. Now, okay, so we've talked about like trying to identify sources of these chemicals in your environment, remove those, and then utilize food to help support detoxification pathways, improve gut health, and your microbiome, and help with elimination. You really want to try to have one bowel movement per day. Drink plenty of water, clean water. I use a reverse osmosis system with a remineralization cartridge that puts minerals back in the water. But I prefer that over, using tap water for sure. And then I'll sometimes add trace minerals and fulvic acid and stuff to my water. And that helps to give me a lot of these other trace minerals that have been stripped from it through the filtering process. So I think that's a good strategy. From a lifestyle perspective, you really want to be careful and mindful of your environment and limiting exposure to harmful chemicals, whether it's like gasoline fumes, like if you're at the gas station, stand upwind from, the gas fumes that are coming out of the car. If you can smell it, you're getting exposed to it. That's one thing. If you're cleaning and you're using, even natural products, I recommend turn the bathroom exhaust fan on, open a window if you can, open the doors. I like to wear, like a mask when cleaning, and especially dusting, to reduce the inhalation of any kind of dust that you're kicking up or anything that's in the air while cleaning. I also think it's valuable to get HEPA filters and put them in each room, or to get a whole house HEPA filter, or better yet, do both of those if you can afford it. But if you can't and you're on a tighter budget, if you can get a HEPA filter for your room where you sleep, and then maybe the room where you spend most of your time while working, if you're working in one room, then that would also be a really good idea. I think those can be really helpful to reduce your exposure to dust and a lot of these chemicals. And just to emphasize this, dust is an incredibly concentrated source of a lot of this crap we're talking about. A lot of these chemicals are on dust. So especially if you have little ones that are crawling around or laying on carpets and stuff, this is you want to keep everything clean. And quite frankly, carpets and rugs just really, really worry me today because of how they're treated and what is on the fabrics. So keep those things in mind if you can, and just try not to worry yourself to death, but definitely be aware, right? So lifestyle choices. Let's see, limit exposure, right? If you can exercise, right? Exercising, it helps to produce antioxidants as long as you're not over-exercising. And then if you have access to like a sauna, or if you can take a warm bath with like Epsom salts and sweat a little bit, that's a fantastic and really untapped way to support detoxification pathways. Our bodies are designed to sweat, and a lot of people never sweat. And that is a really, really helpful way to help get this stuff out of your body that you're not going to get out, you're not going to do really any other way. So sweating can be incredibly helpful. And then, like I said, some very moderate exercise can be helpful. And if you can do vigorous exercise and you have the physical capacity to recover, then definitely go for it. Do that as well. So diet is incredibly helpful. Lifestyle choices are incredibly helpful. As far as supplementation goes, I mean, the main thing here is there are absolutely a ton of different supplements that you can utilize to support detoxification pathways. One of the things that, without getting too technical here, there are two major phases of detoxification in the liver. There's phase 1 detoxification pathways, or technically biotransformation, phase 2 biotransformation pathways. And a lot of people have problems when their phase 1 detoxification pathway is really active, and their phase 2 is not, because the phase 1 detoxification pathway can make some chemicals and hormones and things that your body is trying to eliminate. In the first step, it can make them very reactive, and you have to have really good phase 2 to deactivate and help with finishing out the biotransformation process of those chemicals and hormones. And if phase 2 is not sufficient, then you can actually have a lot of these really reactive chemicals in the body that you don't want to be there. So supporting phase 2 detoxification is really helpful. And one of the the best ways that I think you can do that is just to make sure that you have like good glutathione status. And you can get glutathione as a supplement, but you can also take N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. You can take liposomal glutathione. You can take S-acetyl glutathione, which is another form that's more absorbable. But the liposomal glutathione is really good. And there are several products out there that are excellent ways to get it if your body's not making, if you're not making enough. And, that's where those sulfur-based compounds and things can be really helpful too. But this is not as much a supplement problem as much as it is a, reducing exposure and then a dietary strategy and a lifestyle strategy are really, really helpful. Those should be like your foundation. And then you can utilize, if appropriate, like a lot of people take supplements and things and they have no idea really if it's needed or why they have conceptually like I'm taking this for detoxification, but they might not need that. And so is it doing any harm? Is it fine? I mean, most of the time people that I work with, they do really well with glutathione and as a short-term strategy to help with immune system regulation and to help with detoxification and lower inflammation, it can be a really helpful short-term strategy. So, supplementation can be helpful. And then again, there are numerous products out there, and a lot of these products are like in a powder form that you can mix into like a shake or something that you can use that can be really helpful as supporting the detoxification or biotransformation pathways of the liver. So those can be great strategies. Okay. And then I don't want to leave this out. Vitamin and mineral status. So one of the things that like I recommend is like a core recommendation for the people that I work with is to consider a multivitamin that is not immune reactive, that doesn't have a bunch of ingredients that tend to drive an immune response. And this can be helpful because a lot of people walk around with deficiencies, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and these vitamins and minerals are essential for your detoxification processes to occur. And so you're walking around with these nutrient potholes. If you think about like on a road, you've got all these potholes everywhere. And so biochemistry cannot occur efficiently. And like for example, if you haven't heard this is commonly kind of said, especially on social media, but it's true that magnesium plays a very significant role in hundreds of biochemical processes. It's called a cofactor. And so if you don't have magnesium, you're not going to carry out your physiology normally. And so you don't want to be deficient in anything. If you're deficient, then your body can't carry out these detoxification pathways and many other biochemical processes efficiently. So a good multivitamin and even supplementing, with magnesium as a separate supplement can be really helpful. And so in these cases, I think filling in these nutrient potholes can help you as well. And if you are able to do any type of testing that can help you to get a better starting point, then I would recommend that if you have that in your budget. But if not, there's so many things that you can do at absolutely no additional cost. And quite frankly, there's probably a lot of people that I work with these days are taking a ton of supplements. And quite frankly, I look at a lot of people's supplements and I'm like, what? Why are you taking, this one and this one and this one? We go down this list and we find out pretty quickly that they listen to a podcast like this and they go buy something. And that's not my intention. What I think you should really consider doing is try to be as specific as possible, and then formulate a strategy that makes sense. And my point there is if you're taking a bunch of supplements, you might be taking some unnecessarily. You might be able to remove those, and then you could take that money towards all those supplements, and you could focus it and direct that towards food and better food and more diverse food. So it's so important to acknowledge and focus on the fact that food is one of the cornerstones of our health, and it should be for you, especially if you're struggling with Hashimoto's or autoimmune disease. It's really important. And so let's see, is there anything else that we should touch on? I think those are the main things: the lifestyle choices, exercise, diet, I think those are the main things. So there's many things that we could talk about here, but I think I've given you a lot of potential ways to support detoxification, reduce your exposure to help you. So if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. If you found this episode helpful, please share and leave a review. It really helps the podcast. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also follow us on YouTube and Facebook at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. You can join our Facebook group, the Greater Hickory Thyroid Support Group with over 11,000 members, and you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Brad Shook. And remember, together, we can make a difference. As we wrap up, remember this: knowledge is your superpower. By understanding and adapting, we can navigate the challenges of our environment and take control of our health. Stay curious, stay empowered, and until next time, take care. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.